have a MacBook Pro, and it's got the multi-sensory touchpad thing. So sometimes if I click a little too enthusiastically, it brings up the dictionary, which is helpful, but I know what the word live means. So maybe I should just try to click a little less. I do everything 1,000%. So including click very hard on my touch.
Let me make sure my phone is off.
Oh, right. Good call.
Airplane mode.
And what I've discovered about mine is not only do I have to have it the ringer turned off, I have to have it face down because a notification will come in. And I am definitely that dog from Up that's like, do, squirrel. So if I see my phone blinking or lighting up or doing anything interesting, it's the same reason I had to close my blinds over here on my window. So my office is facing the street. And anytime I would see anybody walking by, especially when we were more in a lockdown mode for the pandemic, people were walking during the day and just, strolling. And every time I would see movement out there, I just lose my train of thought. I was just like, oh, who's that? What are you doing? What are you doing out there? So, and it's never interesting. Like, it's just people walking their dogs or doing whatever. So I have to sometimes get my own environment in distraction-free mode.
Yeah. Definitely need to do that here too.
Yeah. What do you find to be really distracting these days?
When my kids are around, that definitely can. And if they're playing video games, that's the worst.
Now, is it the worst because they're excited and they're noisy, or is it the worst because, as happens to me, the songs get stuck in my head?
Oh, no, they're noisy, and I think these games actually are very frustrating at points. So you'll just hear them getting more and more frustrated. Or if they're playing, with friends, we've got a Wii, an old one, but they'll be in there playing with friends, and
I love it. The Wii is so fun.
Yeah,
so fun. I gave mine away to someone with some kids many years ago, and just recently, of course, with the lockdown and having to stay home more and more, I was just really thinking, man, I wish I had a Wii. I wonder if I could find one on Facebook Marketplace or something.
Yeah. I think you can find it pretty inexpensively.
I should really.
Know what?
This Fireside chat has already paid off. Look at this.
Well, actually, let me check in because I think my son, he's been working for a neighbor and he earned $200. So he just bought himself a new Wii, I think. So we may have a Wii I could just give you. So remind me, and we can figure out. I have to check in with him, but I don't think we're going to be needing it. So unless he's promised it to someone else.
That's so fun. Thank you. We'll get this figured out for sure. Oh, look, we have people joining. So we've got Steve. Hey, Steve. We've got folks joining from the UK, and not just our AutoCrit team from the UK. So that's always fun. We did a competition, Lisa, in one of the deep dives where Gareth was presenting, and we said points to whomever can pinpoint his accent, and we just got the most amazing guesses. It was fantastic. So he is from Northern Ireland.
Wow.
So yes, we actually had someone pretty early on nail it. So that was interesting. We didn't reveal the true answer until later in the show, but that was fun times. Next time, hopefully, maybe we'll get Michael, who's another member of our team in the UK, and maybe he's got a very different accent from a very different part. So that'll be fun.
I used to live in San Francisco, and I went out to eat with two friends from college, and the waitress had what sounded clearly like a Boston accent. And my friend said, where are you from? And she said, guess. So he said Medford, which is like the way people from Medford say Medford. And she said, born and raised. She was
born and raised. Oh,
that's that town in Massachusetts. I was blown away. I still remember, it was like decades later, I still remember it because
I love that.
so
I love that story. Well, the
and
neighborhoods.
people would guess like Australia. People could not figure out her accent.
If you're not from the Boston area, but if you are, you can get it down to like the block that people lived on. It's like Medford in like between A and B, whatever spots. So yeah, fantastic. I love it. Hey, Irv, good to see you. So let's see. Irving's in South Africa, and that's what, 5 hours ahead, I think. So it might be
evening,
right? Yes. So we've got a lot of evening birds, night owls. I've had a rough day with what are those comparison things called? I've had a rough day with the words today, Lisa. So I'm so glad you're here to take over that.
See if I can help out.
See if we can. So
AutoCrit can help with that.
My goodness, I might be beyond the help that even AutoCrit can give me today.
I have days like that too.
My goodness, the words, they're very difficult right now. I'm not sure why. We got a new kit. Oh, Irv says they're 6 hours ahead. Okay, so it is 7 p.m. there. Good times. This will be a nice, like, well, the folks I know from South Africa eat dinner very late. I was going to say this will be a nice show with dinner, but if you're on the braai, then it'll be 9 p.m. before you get to eat. 9 p.m. before you even start the braai, and then 10 p.m. before you eat.
Wow.
Hey, Rita. Harry. Harry says we need to change the days because Tuesdays are his beer-free days. So like we should do like a cocktail hour.
Oh yeah. You know what? I'm going to close this window because my my neighbor's music can get a little bit loud.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we've got just about, there it goes. The timer is out and we are 2 minutes past 1. So we've given people a little bit of time to come in and take their virtual seats, if you will. So I'm going to take that down so you can just see us. Welcome, everybody. So welcome. This is Beth from AutoCrit, and today I am joined by a special guest for what we call affectionately the Fireside Chats that no one in Florida wants to think about right now because it is so hot and humid. It is the same here in Georgia. It's hard to even look at my backdrop with the fire because it is so warm. So we've got definitely Florida, Ontario, South Africa, which I hear is just gorgeous right now. It's their winter, so that means it's 71 instead of 72 degrees if you're down in the Mossel Bay area. So excellent. Great to see everybody. We're going to jump right in with our session today with Miss Lisa Tenner, who is a writing coach and workshop facilitator, among other things, as well as being an author herself. I am going to go ahead and let Lisa kick us off with just a quick introduction. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do, your background, and how did you even become a writing coach to begin with?
Well, it was very roundabout. I always loved writing. It was a passion for me even as a kid. I wasn't the best reader because I was a very slow reader, which I think actually makes for a good editor in some ways, but I pronounce every word in my head. But I loved to write. I wrote poetry a lot as a kid. And then, I went to MIT, so a totally kind of different thing, but we had amazing writers there at the time. And so I studied with Frank Conroy, who later became the director of the Iowa Writers Workshop. And at the time that he taught our seminar, he was the director of the National Endowment for Arts and Literature. And Gertrude Schnackenberg, a wonderful poet, Irene Taylor, and A.R. Gurney Jr., who was a playwright. So I got to try all these different kinds of writing, which was so much fun. And then ended up doing a really different kind of writing. I did computer related things for a few years, went back to business school. I ran a nonprofit for 10 years. And while I was at the nonprofit, I got quite sick, and this thing helped me called polarity therapy. It's kind of it draws upon a bunch of traditions, including Chinese traditional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine in India, and a whole bunch of things. But interestingly, I was lying in bed one night. I'm giving you kind of a long version.
This is fine. Great. It's so interesting.
Long version, but I was lying in bed one night and I couldn't sleep, and it was like this. It felt like anger inside me, like frustration, and like I just felt like jumping out of my skin. So it was really not a good state to try to sleep in. And I thought, well, in polarity, we're learning about, emotions as energy, and anger is considered fiery energy. So I'll just imagine this fire energy coursing through my body. And I started to feel great, but like with all that fire energy coursing through my body, there was no way I was going to sleep. But I got the idea for my first book, and 7 years later, it got published. I co-authored with Jane Middleton Moss and Pico Todd, who both knew a lot more about writing and publishing a book than I did. So I really was fortunate to have these wonderful colleagues for that first book. And then when the book got published by Health Communications, Pico and I would teach anger workshops, and I quickly realized, I don't really enjoy working with people with anger. The book had this idea of tapping in, helping people tap into their innate wisdom, their sense of humor, their creativity to deal with anger. But you get these, often they would be like these guys whose wives had sent them to the workshop, and they'd be like this, and I thought
completely closed off body language, not receptive. Yes.
And I realized, I want to work with people's creativity, and I thought, well, maybe I'll be a creativity coach. But quickly, I started teaching workshops that kind of took people into those 5 steps that I used for getting into a creative space. And pretty quickly, people were coming to me specifically for writing. And because I had successfully gotten a traditional publisher for help with book proposals. So, it was this thing that evolved very much over time without a big picture plan for a long time. And I found out like who were my clients by the people who came to me and what they were asking for. I was probably one of the early people to get on the boat of having a website. I did a barter with my local librarian, and he put up the first site for me, and I did some creativity and writing coaching for him. So, it was a very organic process. There weren't a lot of people calling themselves book coaches in those days, or so it really was like something that just evolved, and it was, as I look back on it, it's sort of a beautiful, but it took a lot of trust. In the beginning, starting a business was challenging.
Absolutely.
And, it wasn't an overnight success.
I wish more things were overnight successes. Wouldn't that be so lovely?
But, it is like such an honor to work with people on their books and on their writing and help them become more confident and become better writers, and really tap into this wellspring of creativity that I think often surprises people. It's so delightful.
Well, and I find it so interesting that in your coaching, you've really been focused a lot on nonfiction, which is, from an AutoCrit audience perspective, we have a significant number of nonfiction, but a lot of our members are fiction, right? Because we were born as a fiction editor. But how are you seeing more and more fiction writers embrace your offerings around creativity, which I can absolutely see being a huge part of fiction writing? How similar or different are you seeing these nonfiction writers versus fiction writers in terms of processes and flow?
Yeah. I mean, I think the book process can be quite different. But then, again, there are people who plot out their novels, and there are people who, just let
Pantsers. Let me see. Raise your hand in the audience if you're a pantser.
Yeah, well, and I have to say, in my book, I really, with my Bring Your Book to Life program, it's very much teaching experts to write the book from what they already know, and they can do the research later. But really in the class, the encouragement is to get that first draft down from all the things they know and leave some holes to fill in for later. So that's a little bit different of a process. But, you know, interestingly, I did start with my own outline for this book that I have been working on, which really, you know, it has elements of memoir in it. I mean, every chapter starts with a little story from my life, and then we go into a practice. Might be breathing practice, qigong, yoga, things like that, Sufi spinning, and then some writing prompts to choose from, and so, you know, for that kind of thing, it really well. Let me finish the first thought, but anyway, for that book, you know, I had this outline, but then I ran out of the ideas that I'd come up with for the outline. And what I found was, it was so sweet the way it happened. I went to a writing retreat with Eric Meisel at Kopalo, and his whole thing is just getting you to write. So all the time we spent writing. We didn't share much reading at all. We just wrote. And also he said, and you've got to get up in the morning and first thing write. So I wrote so much, and I didn't know what I was going to write about for the most part. I had a couple of ideas for chapters, and then it was just whatever came. And those are some of my favorite chapters that I hadn't known what I was going to write about. And I just wrote about the day and somehow tied that into a practice and writing prompts. And, you know, it kind of opened things up, actually not having as much of an idea. So, you know, I think every book's different, every writer's different, and it's hard to pinpoint, like, oh, always use this process or something like that. But this particular book that I'm writing very much works for fiction or nonfiction or poetry or essays. I mean, it really can work for anything, because it's all about getting into that space where you know, where the writing flows, and also I think it's your best stuff. It's your most inspired, elevated self, right? And you're writing from there. And some of the writing prompts, I think, are you know, are funky and like surprising. And so it's really just about kind of opening up and then seeing, if you're working on a bigger project, you can choose a prompt, or you can say, okay, I'm just going to go right from this practice, breathing practice or whatever, to
right.
working on. But sometimes a prompt can, you know, with a short exercise, can kind of open you up in a new way. So I think, you know, people will use the book differently.
Absolutely. And you know, we love a writing prompt here at AutoCrit, especially if you were part of our last community writing challenge, where we had not only a prompt in the form of an opening sentence you had to use, we threw a little twist in the middle because we like to, you know, kind of be extra, and made everyone use the same closing sentence as well. And they were light years apart from one another. So I love the idea, and we at AutoCrit love the idea of things like writing prompts to kind of get you in that flow, but still being able to direct it in the path where you're inspired. And speaking of kind of that inspiration and getting in the flow, do you think that's kind of the most, getting there, is that probably the most common challenge you see your clients facing? Or do you see your clients really struggling with maybe something else in terms of obstacles and roadblocks?
You know, it's a great question. I think there are a few main challenges, and that's certainly, no question, one of them. The one that comes even before that is getting your butt in the chair and actually doing it, right? So that's like for a lot of people. That's where that Eric Meisel retreat was so great, because he's just about, you know, notice what you're thinking that's making you avoid it, and just, you know, tell yourself a new thought that might be more empowering. And he says that procrastination is just anxiety. So if you manage your anxiety, you can manage it. And it was interesting to hear him say that, because I do all this work with breath, and that's one of the main things in my book, is helping people, you know, doing some breathing practices that then open up the writing. It's kind of incredible. And I just discovered that with my Qigong practice is how I really realized that it opened the floodgates. But he says, one great way to manage anxiety is deep breathing. So I thought, oh, how about that? That's kind of cool.
That is really cool. And when you lay it out like that, procrastination is born of anxiety, it makes total sense, because I'm so anxious that my work product won't be as good as I expect it to be. By the way, my expectations are always artificially high. So everyone, I think, is harder on themselves than they are on anyone else, and vice versa. So that anxiety of, getting started, and what if I'm no good, and what if I fail, and what if, that anxiety can really exactly drive you to procrastinate in many ways, whether it's finding something else to do, literally anything else to do, or not, just not honoring your commitments to yourself. If you're we're doing a quick poll out in the community soon. I don't want to spoil it, but how many people use goals around the time they write every day, or the words they write every day or week, or they just go for it and write whenever they're inspired and do their thing. It's so interesting to see how that anxiety could really lead to procrastination and how you work through that. So that's fantastic. And I love that a deep breathing exercise, or even meditation, if you're not into that woo-woo stuff, then take a walk, something to occupy your mind and distract it from those anxious thoughts will really be helpful.
And a walk is great, because I do think nature just naturally puts you in a really
soothing flow. Absolutely. So in terms of, we're going to pivot real quick. Nonfiction books. Huge range of nonfiction books, similar to all the genres that are available in fiction. But in nonfiction, it's biography, it's a cookbook, it's a business strategy book, it's a magazine, it's a self-help book, whatever that is. I don't want you to have to pick a favorite, but I am going to put you on the spot and ask you to pick a favorite. Do you have a favorite topic that you prefer to work with, or that is just every time you see one of these come across your desk, you're just, I can't wait to get into this topic?
Well, I love the variety, but I do love self-help. And those, certainly, I would say most of the books I work on are self-help, either by therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, coaches, doctors, healers, a wide variety of people, and business leaders, quite a few leadership books. And there's such a variety in that one genre. So it's really fun. One person I'm working with right now, she does leadership with horses, and she brings, like the C-suite teams in to learn deep lessons about leadership by working with horses. It's kind of amazing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, her name's Amanda Madorno, and her work is just extraordinary. So, I'm always, anyway. So it's all fun for me, I think. I don't work on a lot of memoir, but when I do, I really enjoy it.
Well, I think the inquisitive mind in me, and I don't call it nosy, I call it inquisitive, would love to work on biographies just to learn more about, other people, and helping someone with their autobiography lets me just dig into their life. So I love that. And the fact that you pointed out, Lisa, something really interesting, that a business book seems like it's going to be dry, it's going to be whatever. But even within business books, there are so many angles and so many perspectives you can take on what you're trying to communicate, whether it's leadership skills or servant leadership or whatever. Horses, why not? That's fantastic. Also, AutoCrit team, I see an outing in our future. I want to do that. Team horses. Wouldn't that be fun? We can invite the whole AutoCrit community. Uh-oh. I think I feel someone about to pull the plug on my show here if I don't stop making wild promises. So Lisa, you mentioned at the start of our show that you have been traditionally published, and so many of your clients have been able to secure major publishing deals with really highly reputable traditional publishing houses. What advice would you give to authors when it comes to approaching these publishers and how to break the ice, how to differentiate yourself in a good way? Or is it the no publicity is bad publicity? What are your thoughts there?
So yeah, in general, no publicity is bad publicity. That's true. But I would say, first of all, you need a book proposal, and it needs to be heavy on the marketing, and you really need to be clear about, who your audience is and how you're already reaching them. If this is pie in the sky and people you're not reaching in general, unless it's like this incredibly newsworthy thing and you're exactly the right person to write it, or some unusual thing. If you don't have a platform where you're already reaching a lot of people, certainly with the prescriptive books, it would be very hard. So sometimes, I'll work with somebody, but part of our work is writing the proposal, and part of the work is really getting that platform in place so that they have, they make, a good sales pitch, basically. And, I do have a few tricks up my sleeve in terms of things that will help. One is definitely bulk sales. So if you can get some bulk sales commitments for bulk sales, and that's going to be written into your contract, so you're responsible for those sales. But that can really convince a publisher, especially with business books. You see a lot of that, but we're seeing more of that with some self-help and other expert type books too. But you'll need a really good proposal, and you'll need a query letter. But don't send the query letter till the proposal is written and ready to go, because once they say yes, they're interested, you want to immediately follow with that proposal. It's great if you can go to some writers' conferences, pitch an agent, and then immediately send the proposal, by email when you get home, or when you even while you're there at the conference, right? If you immediately get it off to them while they're excited. So don't send a query out unless the proposal is ready to go. But and you don't need a query exactly if you meet the agent somewhere and they say, sure, send me your proposal. But a reminder's good. Maybe in the subject line, we met at the Harvard Medical School publishing course, and here's the requested proposal. That's too long a subject, so shorten that. That subject line needs an editor. It needs AutoCrit.
I wish we could help with that.
You get my point. So you want and you want to excite them. One agent that I love working with, Linda Connor, always says you want something counterintuitive. So often it's really helpful if in that overview, in that first paragraph, you say something counterintuitive, right? Something that's like the opposite of what everybody thinks. And it's evidence-based, right? There's research, new research that supports that. That's the kind of thing that really will, get somebody excited because it's so fresh. But if there's no platform, it's still going to be hard to sell. So you need both.
That's fantastic. And I think in the example you just gave, meeting a publisher and in person, that's a verbal query right there. So it doesn't have to be a query letter. They can agree to look at your proposal verbally, and then it's perfectly fine to follow up immediately with that. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I want to clarify one thing though. So I was generally talking about meeting agents.
Sorry, what did I say?
That's okay, but it's good you said it because it brings up, I think, a big question people are often asking is, should I go with an agent or a publisher? And there's not generally, if you can get an agent, it's better because then they'll query a bunch of publishers at the same time. They know who to be asking within a publishing house. Like they'll know this is the acquisitions editor for this book. They know the personalities. And so you have a better chance with each house, and then you have a better chance of it going to auction, getting multiple bids, and they can handle all that. They can negotiate that. And they also negotiate your contract. You do not, if you don't have an agent, you want to go to a lawyer who negotiates contracts for books, because the initial contract's not going to be in your favor at all. And it's really bad. I've heard horror stories from people. So, yes, definitely if you can get an agent, get an agent. However, I do work with quite a few clients who maybe have some platform, and it's probably enough for a publisher, but it's not enough for an agent. And the reason is, like, it's enough to publish, but you're not going to get much of an advance. And so if an agent's putting all this time in, and then you've got a $5,000 advance and they get $1,000 of that, or even less, then, that's not good use of their time, right? And they can't really afford to do that.
Mm.
So what there are instances where it really isn't going to be easy to get an agent, but you can go directly to publishers. So, there are nuances to this.
Now, I'm going to play the newbie card.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do both? You probably can't do both. When you have an agent, you sign on. It's like signing on with a realtor, and they're your people, and that's it.
And let's say you actually approach some publishers, and then you want to go to an agent. You have to let that agent know which publishers you've already sent to, and if they were no's, then that doesn't look good. And if you've got a yes, now how is the agent going to time that? That publisher wants to hear back, and you haven't gone to anybody else yet. So, the only thing sometimes we'll see is maybe somebody has a personal relationship or something, and there's a publisher interested, and then then you get an agent, but you want them to send it out, but it can be tricky with timing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about self-publishing? We hear so much about that today in terms of both fiction and nonfiction. Do you think that's a viable route for, especially for nonfiction, because it's such a different approach?
Yeah. And all the stuff I said about agents and publishers, I mean, that's really in the nonfiction world, right? Because fiction, people are looking to discover that next amazing writer. And so you don't necessarily have to have a big reach, although I think more and more publishers like to see a reach if you've got it. But yeah, so getting back to your new question, can you remind me the question?
Absolutely. We were just going to talk about self-publishing and how viable that might be for either fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah. So I think very viable. And, there are a lot of benefits. Number one, you have control. And also, if you wanted to update that book, like let's say in the nonfiction world, there's new research, new information, and you suddenly wow, it would be great to include that. You can just do that. You can update your book just like that. So, or you notice a few typos. I mean, hopefully you proofread it. But, sometimes even the designer does something, and then suddenly, like, the typeset, not typeset nowadays, but, it gets changed, and suddenly there's a typo where there wasn't, right?
Sure.
So you can change those things. You can update it. So, that's a benefit. And you can do certain things that maybe you can't do with a publisher. And I believe that if you self-publish with Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, that the algorithm does, I think the algorithm does favor you in some ways if you.
Interesting.
I don't quote me on that. I heard that. So
big disclaimer on the video for anyone watching live or watching the recording. Big disclaimers.
I'm not as much, I don't walk my clients through that piece. I hand them over to somebody who's an expert in that.
Sure.
But I have heard that. So there are some advantages, and then also you can have it much faster, right?
Yeah.
So there are some advantages, and for some people it makes a lot of sense. I have I work with a lot of authors who've won awards, and prestigious awards like the Nautilus Award, and trying to think of some others. Anyway, a bunch of different awards, and about half of them self-published. So in fact, I had 3 Nautilus Award winners this year, and one of them self-published. It was Jill Sylvester, and her book is Trust Your Intuition.
Wow.
And so you can self-publish a great book, and then I think a lot of times self-published authors like to go after awards because that gives it that credibility that you might not have
Mm.
if you're not traditionally published. So right away you add to that credibility. You could also get some really nice blurbs on a self-published book and put one at the very top of your
Right.
cover, something like that, from somebody very well known, a celebrity or New York Times bestselling author. And those are ways to, up that credibility in self-publishing. But absolutely, it's a great route, and a lot of my clients go that route as well.
I love that. When you said about 50% were self-published of a lot of your authors, I was surprised. That's a pretty high percentage, especially considering kind of how quickly the market is growing and shifting. That's fantastic. And the benefits that you brought up around being able to, especially in the nonfiction world, quickly update and revise your content and get it out there in the world. The first to market aspect of that surely can't be underestimated. So that's fantastic to think about.
Yeah, for certain kinds of books, it could be an advantage. And it's interesting because I have my Bring Your Book to Life program. I teach it once a year, and the people who are working on a book proposal, they're not going to have that book published by the end of that year. But people who are working on self-publishing often write that first draft in class, 8 weeks, and it's usually like February, March. Sometimes it's March, April, sometimes it's a little earlier. But by September, October, November, they may be already publishing their book. So it not all of them, but some of them. So it can definitely be faster.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think just the time to get to that fantastic feeling of having your own published book in your hands, that's got to be a really compelling argument for a lot of people to go the self-publishing route. Definitely. So you mentioned one of your programs called Bring Your Book to Life, but I know you have another terrific program that I think you've kind of just recently started, which is, and let me get the name correct, Get Your Writing Done. Talk to me a little bit about that and what happens when people join up with that offering.
So I am having so much fun with this class, and it really started as a bonus to Bring Your Book to Life and my other Fast Track Your Book Proposal program. And especially, so with Fast Track Your Book Proposal, I just said, let me use some of the stuff in the book I'm working on and test it out on people, and I'll offer a few bonuses, and it'll be extra calls that you guys, in our normal class, I'm doing a lot of teaching, and I said, in this this could be a supplement where you get some writing done, and hence the name. And then with Bring Your Book to Life, I was teaching during the pandemic, and I just felt like, we had a hospital COO, so she was like at the, forefront of like having to deal with everything, getting masks and ventilators and managing protocols. And then we had a bunch of people who were like entrepreneurs, and suddenly like, oh, where's my business going to go? Because people need to do this stuff in person. Yeah. So people were kind of panicked, and I thought, well, let me extend the class a little, just for no cost, so we can really help people get more done on their books, because it really, there were a few weeks where people just they were really having trouble finding the time or the energy to write. So we started doing these bonuses with similar to what I'm doing now with Get Your Writing Done, and they loved it. And people just found it so productive to do these exercises or practices and then write. And it was so much fun for me, and I got to do some writing or editing on the call myself, which was really fun. So it's helped me make progress on my book. But it's been delightful. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to offer this as a regular offering. And so now we're doing it twice a month, Thursdays, second Thursday and fourth Thursday of the month. And it's a 2-hour call, but I'm saying people can get on for the first hour, and there's kind of a encapsulation to that. So if you really don't think you could write for more than half an hour, you can just do that first hour, and it includes a half hour of writing or a little bit more. And then if people want to stay on for the next hour, get to do some more writing. So it's been fun. Most people tend to stay on, but sometimes people just can't devote a whole 2 hours and they still get a chunk of writing done.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. And how long did you say the program typically runs?
Well,
There's no typical anymore.
First, I set it up as 2 months, and people could sign up for 1 month or the 2 months. But we're just going into the second month, and I think I'm going to continue to keep offering it. So now I put it on the website as July, August that people can sign up for. But I think I'm going to just continue it, and there may be people who want to just make it part of their life to always have these 2 Thursdays where they know they're going to write and they know they're going to be supported to get in a really great space for flow. And the other thing, I'm offering it on Zoom, and I've told people, and they do this, is, for those who want to then write for 30 minutes and then like share with a partner and then share in the bigger group a little bit about the experience, fine. But if you get going and you're just on a roll and you want to use the full 2 hours to write, that's fine. Or at the end of the call, if you want to keep writing. So people are doing that too. So it's very, you can just turn off the sound on the computer and you're writing in this room, right? You're not doing it alone. And for some people, that there's something really safe, I think, and it creates something, this circle of creativity that you can draw on when you're writing. And so it's been really lovely.
It's fantastic.
I'm just going to continue doing it.
Right. And so it sounds like it's meeting a number of needs, everything from just having an accountability buddy to having time blocked on your calendar that you've committed to, and you've made a small financial commitment, which makes it even more real for people, and all the way on to the exercises to get your creativity flowing, to really get you in that headspace to write, and the writing itself. And maybe even some beta readers or some feedback sessions with others in the group. So there's a lot of goodness happening in that 2 hours every other Thursday.
It is, yeah.
That's fantastic. And so, spoiler for, it's not a spoiler, it's just news. We at AutoCrit have ever so graciously been granted a discount code that we can share with all of our community members. Especially, so you're hearing it here first, folks, on the live stream, that we can get you a little bit of a savings if you would like to experience Lisa's offering of Get Your Writing Done, which is fantastic. You can actually see more, learn more about Lisa on lisatenner.com. We'll be sharing our discount link via email and in our community, our Facebook community. So it sounds like that is just going to be so fantastic to have that accountability and feed off each other's creativity, even if it's virtually through Zoom.
It works. In fact, 2 people in Bring Your Book to Life liked it so much they decided to set up a retreat. They were accountability partners, and they set up a retreat where the 2 of them all weekend did some of the exercises and then wrote, and that was really neat to see.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That is, well, I mean, that's such a huge success story that really reinforces what you're providing really works. Very effective stuff. Now, those clients had some really great successes just working in one of your groups. Have you ever encountered, Lisa, a client that you just thought you couldn't help them? They came to you with whatever, and you're like, I can't help you. Have you ever encountered that?
Yes. And, it's rare, and I've learned not to second guess it at first, because in the beginning, sometimes people would come to me with writing that I just thought, how am I going to help them make sense of this? It was just like a waterfall. Like it was just, like so intense, but no structure or anything. And I've realized, like, a lot of times people haven't had a class on writing. They want to write a book, but they've never learned how to really write. So sometimes like somebody I'm not sure I can help at first, I really find, they're a great student, and I can't believe from draft 1 to draft 2, this chapter, it's like, what happened? And I remember one guy, I said to him, Adam, like, what happened? It's like that draft you sent me first to this, like, I can't get over it. He said, oh, I studied the edits you sent me, and I really studied your feedback. Like, and when I say studied your feedback, I mean I really studied your feedback. So, I think people can teach themselves how to write, whether working with AutoCrit or an editor. It's a skill you can learn. And so I try not to prejudge it, but there are people also where I just know I'm not the right person for them. And it might even just be a personality thing. So I do have a referral program as well. But most people, I think, when I guess it also depends on their commitment, right? Like I can remember, this was very early on in my practice, but I worked with somebody, and she liked the idea of having a book, but she would come to our coaching calls having written nothing, like many times. And so I said to her, if you don't come with writing next time, this is it. And she was paying me. It was hard to say, because now it would be easy. But at that point, I didn't have much income at all, and had a child, and it was, and my husband had his own business, and it was a challenging time. But I couldn't just keep showing up if she wasn't going to write. So she didn't show up with writing. So it's rare, though. I mean, I think most people who are hiring a writing coach, they're committed. They're motivated. But
absolutely, I think so. I heard a couple of things in there. One, there is hope for almost everybody, which is fantastic. Everyone can learn and improve. But the other thing, really, you can't help people who literally are not writing, and we have.
Yeah.
So that would be a deal breaker. We have a similar, obviously, thing in editing to say you can't edit a blank page, so you have to get the word out there. For those of us out there, for those watching our live stream, we will have a couple of minutes for live Q&A with Lisa. So go ahead and make sure you put your questions in the comments if you're watching us live. If you're watching this recorded, I apologize. You won't be able to live stream answer your questions, but definitely take a look at the comments and see if perhaps we got to your question live on air.
If not, people can come to the blog, and I always answer questions.
Oh, sure.
The post is not exactly related. Put your questions on the comments.
And you can find her blog at lisatenner.com. So that will be a great and easy way to get in touch with Lisa if you have questions that we don't get to today, but wanted to, while I still have you, and while the group is teeing up any questions they may have, you mentioned earlier that procrastination, and really that stemming from a lot of anxiety and perhaps some self-doubt, are some of the biggest mental blocks that authors really have to battle. They have to overcome that in order to even write. Anything else that you feel or that you see authors really need to overcome from a mental perspective so they can get that book across the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, some people I think do have a challenge with finishing things, very perfectionistic, and you have to know when to say, okay, now let me put it through AutoCrit, or let me, let me take this off my plate. Let me give it to beta readers. You can't hold on to it forever. So there's that piece of letting go and being willing to get feedback. And then it can be overwhelming when you get feedback. So it's important to have a plan, I think, for how you're going to address the feedback. Don't send it to 200 people for feedback. I mean, there are people who do that. And I just, if you really want feedback, you're going to need to spend time with each of those feedback, and it would be just overwhelming. So think of how many people you want to send to at a time, and then also you need to think about that feedback then. Like, not all the feedback you get is going to be spot on. So you need to sort of step in and say, wow, is that true? And maybe run it by another person and say, what do you think of this particular comment? But it takes some time to do all that, and it does take letting go a little bit. There's a element of trust when you bring it to others, but you can't hold on to it forever, or it's never going to get in front of your readers.
I mean, that has to be so difficult, and really coming back to that anxiety part, it's so difficult to put yourself out there, even to beta readers, even to your mom, or someone who's really going to be, quite clearly on your side. Yeah. It's got to be so challenging. So that mental toughness really, I think, comes into play with it. And you mentioned also being able to take feedback and really be critical about the feedback itself. And we at AutoCrit completely agree with that. Any sort of recommendations that AutoCrit as a platform would give to an author are just that. They're recommendations. They're based on, measurements against other best-selling books. But, the choice really lies with that author to make those creative decisions and use tools like adverbs or showing versus telling, etc., in judicious ways that make your story interesting and still stay true to the spirit that you want as the creative force. So Fantastic. We've got a couple of questions that I want to make sure we get to with the community. Oh, great one. I'm going to start with this, and this is from a Facebook user. As a reminder of folks that are watching on our Facebook group, there is a StreamYard little permissions that you would need to grant in order for us on the show to see your name. But so far, what we can see from this user is just that they're a Facebook user, and that's okay too, because this question I think is really interesting. Do you recommend authors post a summary of their book on their website? And I'll expand that to website, Facebook, putting it out there anywhere on some social media or on the internet when they're pitching to agents while they're building their audience. Is there too much to give away? Should you keep it all close? Yeah.
It does depend a lot on the book itself. But I would say in general, this is your book. You don't want somebody to end up taking your ideas. So I would be a little more circumspect, but I would say share pieces of it. Decide how much of it you want to share. And you might do some tangential things. So when I was working with Dr. Vicki Dunkley, who wrote Reset Your Child's Brain, she was really one of the first people that were writing about the effects of electronic screens on children's brains.
Oh.
And so she didn't have a huge platform at first, and we were concerned that was the kind of book where somebody with a huge platform would come along and scoop the whole idea, because it wasn't original research she had original stories, but the research was all stuff she had looked up, and if she just printed that on her blog, somebody would have her material. So instead, we decided to focus on some tangential things like electronic screens and Tourette's syndrome.
Oh.
And so very, very specific niche things that wouldn't necessarily give away her whole book. So we were kind of careful about that. And then once the agent was pitching, the agent said, okay, now it's time you can give more about the book and get some publicity here. So it was a fine line.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. So you have to think about your own book, and is this something somebody might scoop or not? But there are ways to get around it as your building platform, and one is to do sort of this tangential stuff.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, but it's fine to share some main stuff too, but just decide, okay, these are the things I'll share, and these are the things I'm going to save for the book. Save some of it for the book. One thing that publishers really don't like, at least in nonfiction, now it might be different in fiction, but in nonfiction, don't offer a free chapter. It doesn't seem to help. I think there were instances some time ago where it maybe was useful. I think now, for the most part, posting a free chapter is not a good direction to go. And at least I heard multiple agents and publishers saying not to do that.
On the nonfiction side in particular.
Nonfiction, yeah.
Yes.
For fiction.
Yeah. Couple more questions from the community. I'm going to try to get us through all the questions that we have. So, what's your advice about writing characters of a different ethnic group or sexuality, gender orientation, just quite so different from you as the author? What's your advice about that?
Well, one is to certainly read stuff by people who come from that background or that propensity or whatever it is. And another is to have some beta readers who can look at it and say, this doesn't, or boy, you're going to get people upset with you with this. So, definitely have some good beta readers. And they'll be able to point out things. I have a good friend who's a multi-award winning children's book author, and she wrote a book where one of the characters had, I think it was a developmental delay. I'm not sure exactly what it was now, but she had a couple beta readers who their children, had a similar situation. So she was able to get some feedback about whether it being true.
That's terrific advice. Yes. And especially in these sensitive times, it's a great idea to have very targeted beta readers, not just friends and family, but also people who are living it every day and people who can guide you on some choices, let's just say.
Yeah, and help you see what you can't see. I mean, we all have our biases. Yes. And it's really important to have some people. So, I mean, that speaks to, I think, having a diverse group of beta readers where, if all your beta readers are going to be like white, then you're going to be missing out on feedback that could be really valuable for your book and perspective that could be really valuable. So do think about, like, how can I reach out to a more diverse group of readers, and it will benefit the book, and I think also make it more inclusive, right? I mean, I think most writers write because we want to reach people, we want to make a difference, we want to serve in some way, right? And so you don't want to hurt people with your book, and yet I think with our biases we can do that on occasion.
Blind spots exist. It's not purposeful. It's so a great set of advice to kind of help avoid some of those pitfalls, definitely. But from the creative side, we say go for it for sure. It's write what's in your heart and in your soul for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just like an actor playing somebody who's different from their background, right?
And they'll be coached on that, and
it's that's I think part of the writer's work is to enter somebody else's world. So it's I think that's a fine thing to do, but it is tricky, and I think you want to be a little careful of cultural, or maybe a lot careful of cultural appropriation too. You definitely need to think about these things. And actually, in my book, because I use Qigong and I use yoga, and so I did ask a friend, I said, is this cultural appropriation? And she said no, so I was relieved.
So I love this next question. So we have two more, and I think we'll have plenty of time for that. It's fantastic. So Steve's finished his first ever novel. Congratulations, by the way. That is huge. But never had any training. You mentioned earlier how to write. So do you have recommendations, Lisa, on where to start in reference to training? Are there good websites or courses, or what's available that you would recommend in terms of getting some more formalized writing training?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one thing is certainly just to do some reading about good writing, and even like older books like Strunk and White is still a great example of what kinds of things to do to build your writing. and when you revise, what to be looking for. And Stephen King has a great book.
Oh.
Now, why am I not thinking of the title? I think is it How to Write? It's it's called Unwriting. Sorry,
yeah.
It's
and I have one in my head too that I'm trying to find the name of.
Yeah. But that's a great book, and half of it's a memoir and half of it is about good writing. So that definitely learning from. Yeah, and then a colleague of mine was taking some courses. I wish I could remember, but it's something like learning from the masters or something. And there are, if you looked up like classes by and you named some really famous, particularly novelists, I think you'd find courses by them. I think Malcolm Gladwell has a course too. So it's
like a master class.
Yeah, the master classes. And my friend said they're really good. In fact, she sent me it free. She's allowed to give somebody a membership. So you're reminding me,
you need to do that.
Time for that, because it is such a great opportunity.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
So the final question we have from our community, and this one has been popular. It's come up at least twice that I've seen. Can you tell us a little bit about the board behind you? It looks like you're doing some planning there, and we would love to hear some of your tips and secrets.
Sure. So when I work with people on nonfiction, I do have this exercise that used to be with color-coded index cards, and then I suddenly realized, we could do it with color-coded stickies. And it's funny, I didn't do that for my book at first. I just wrote a linear outline on a piece, and I typed it in. And then after I had my first draft, it was like, okay, now I think I need to put some exercises around and put them with a different chapter and maybe combine some chapters. And I was totally overwhelmed. And then I remembered my exercise and said, I bet I could do it now and put it on stickies and then move them around. So that's what I did.
Nice.
And I went to the Jamestown Public Library in Rhode Island, and we have so many beautiful libraries here. We're very lucky. But they had a nice conference room, and I spread out and 2 days. It was one weekend, and created this. But what I did discover is the stickies do fall off if you're transporting them in your car. So tape them if you're but not too many fell off, but a couple fell off. So yeah, we want to tape them or write notes that make it clear where they go. But yeah, it's really helpful. And so let's see if I can remember. So the yellow thing in the corner is the chapter. Then some notes in orange. Then the pink is about the story that starts the chapter. The yellow is the practice, the kind of spiritual practice or breathing practice. The blue is a prompt. And then this other yellow looks like some other notes of things to add and stuff. So, it's just a way to kind of picture everything. And I think often a book is so unwieldy, right? It's such a big thing. And so this was a way to make it wieldy.
Yes, wieldy. Make it wieldy. I think this is the first time I've ever heard that phrase.
Unwieldy. Wieldy's a word. I know unwieldy. We'll have to check AutoCrit.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes. Well, you had me at colored Post-it notes. My green ones disappear like magic in my hands. Ooh, that's fun. But yeah, you had me at colored Post-its. Definitely. And I will say my personal recommendation, the super sticky kind are much less likely to fall off.
Because you're sticking all four corners, right?
Oh, yes. But I have tape, and yes, I'm a big fan of planning via Post-it, and that works really well for fiction as well in terms of, where your plot points are going to go, in which chapter, in which order, and just being able to move those along on a timeline and visually categorized by character or location, or whatever makes sense for categorization in your fiction or nonfiction writing. Absolutely. That is great. Thank you, Lisa. I loved having a peek inside your process and loved all the tips that you shared with us today. We've covered everybody's questions in the we have a lot of notifications that could very much remember the name of Stephen King's book. So even our AutoCrit team can remember. Oh no, boy. I told Lisa as we got started today, I've had a tough day with the words, so I'm glad Lisa is here to help me. Well, we have had such a wonderful time. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you everyone out there in our Facebook community for tuning in today. The recording of this course will be posted in our videos section. We can watch it again and again, anytime you would like, on demand. We will also be posting more information about how to learn more about Lisa and her offerings and some of her great advice and information on her blog. We'll be posting that in the community as well. And keep your eyes peeled, as always, for your emails from AutoCrit. We will have a great offer in there for you to join Get Your Writing Done by Lisa and have some dedicated time to get your inspiration flowing and get some writing done. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Bye.